Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Adventure Built. My name is Kelly. We're back in the garage for another install. We are putting white knuckle off-road sliders on my 2020 Tacoma. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the channel. I've known about white knuckle off-road products, especially their rock sliders, for quite a long time, but I don't actually know anyone that has them on their vehicle, and I'm kind of one of those guys that likes to look and touch and feel something before I buy it. Luckily, John and Natalie, who are the owners of White Knuckle Off-Road Products, they were at Adventure Expo in California that Trevor and I went to about 2 months ago, and I was able to talk to John a lot about the product itself. And I will link that video right here. Now, I've got to be honest, the company is great. John is super knowledgeable. You can tell just by how he talks that he knows exactly what he is talking about when it comes to rock sliders. These are a proven product, and you can tell just by the quality of the build. So I worked with Natalie pretty closely on getting my sliders ordered and exactly what I was looking for, and they absolutely nailed it. First off, they said 4 to 6 week build time, and they were shipped in 4 weeks, which is phenomenal. Usually those build times always go towards the end. This was right at 4 weeks, which is perfect. Secondly, they shipped right to my door, no hassles whatsoever. Usually you have to go to a distribution center to actually pick up overweight products. These go right to your door because they are under that threshold of whatever weight that shipping companies need to have that, to have a pickup done. So yes, the boxes are bulky, but you can 100% drag them in your garage, no problem at all. And speaking of boxes, the shipping packaging that they use is top notch. There was not a single ding or dent in the powder coat when I opened the boxes up, and the boxes were in phenomenal condition. And I did receive those in 3 days from FedEx, which is super impressive. Southern California all the way to Arizona. And again, the quality of packaging on these sliders, which were powder coated, was expert level 10. There's no way you could package them any better than what they were done from White Knuckle. So now that I've unpackaged them, the powder coat is beautiful. There is not a flaw, ding, dent in the entire, I've gone over these pretty well, not a flaw, it's perfect. And as far as the build quality goes, these are again, expert level 10. The welds are perfect, the bends are flawless. This thing is just really well put together, and it's beefy. These are definitely gonna take a hit and keep on rolling. And Natalie and John were amazing to work with. Super easy, very professional. I highly recommend, if you are in the market for sliders, give them a call. Now let's check out what's in the box. So you obviously have a driver's side, passenger side slider. I opted for the cover plates because my wife very rarely, but does sometimes, wear high heels, so I didn't want her breaking her ankle getting in and out of the Tacoma with the sliders. It comes with all grade 8 hardware, mounting hardware for the cover plates, and all of the welded nuts you're gonna need to get this thing mounted up strong. These are all the tools you'll need to get this job done. 2 floor jacks, a high-speed drill. You're gonna want something to, like a thread cutter or a WD-40 to cool your bit down. If you have the cover plates, you're going to need a 11mm socket and a 4mm Allen or hex key, 2 C-clamps. You're also going to need a small flathead screwdriver to get those cover plates off for the front caps, 3/4 inch wrench, a 3/4 inch socket with a driver, a 12mm wrench to get a couple accessory nuts off. You're gonna want a 1/8, 1/4, and 1/2 inch drill bits, and I highly suggest doing high quality drill bits, otherwise you'll be drilling for a very long time. And of course you're gonna want a center punch, gloves, and of course safety glasses. To get this install started, I pulled my truck into the garage. However, I'm only able to pull it in halfway. My rooftop tent is still on my truck from last weekend's trip, so I'm kind of stuck with this half in the garage, half out of the garage, which really sucks because of course it's 99 degrees, and why wouldn't it be in Arizona on early May? It's a little early for the heat, but bring it. It's gonna be 118 before you know it. To start off with, I'm working the passenger side first. I laid out the rock slider, my 2 floor jacks, and all of the hardware I need to install it, and we're gonna start with step 1. Step 1 is going to involve this little guy. Now this is a 2" by 2 7/8" steel plate with a nut welded to the center hole. And this is going to insert into a rectangular hole in the cross member at the front where the rock slider mounts. Like I said, we're working on the passenger side first. This is the front of the rock slider, and you can see that this angle here is not a sharp bend, but it's angled kind of downward, and that matches up with the contour of the frame here. And this is going to be the cross member to the transmission. So step number 1 is going to be taking your plate, and we're going to insert it into this large rectangular hole here, and you want to orient it so that the nut is facing up away from the slider. And once you have it in here, you can use these side holes to manipulate it and push it up where you need it to be. So now that we have that nut where we want it, the next step is going to be to get the sliders on top the jack stands below the rocker panel. Now I've got my jack stands kind of set up where there's no mounting brackets. That way they're out of the way for any mounting locations later. And now we're gonna lift the rock slider up, we're gonna get it on top of that jack stands and get it situated where it should land. So I've gotten the rock slider up on the jack stands. However, there's still about a 2" clearance I need to make up. What I'll end up doing is probably just raise up one side, raise the stand up, raise up the other side, and raise the stand up. You can 100% use a floor jack to get these up. They're heavy, but they're manageable. Get it up the best you can without hurting yourself. You should be totally fine. They're not that heavy. Now I'm just checking to see how all the holes line up. And I found on my very front mount, where it mounts to the front side of the frame, there's actually a block there. It looks like there's a little plastic tab that kind of covers up that hole. So I'm going to take a little handy dandy flathead screwdriver and peel that little cap off of that hole so I can access it. So right here is the rectangular hole that we put the nut into on the plate. And this is the cap that I'm talking about that is blocking off that hole that we have to access to a bolt that goes through a hole here and into here. Taking the screwdriver under the, and I'm prying it up. Well, that was not easy. And this is the plug that was in there. Cool, now we've got our hole back. Now that we've got that cap out of the way, we can actually utilize that front hole. I'm gonna push the slider back against the frame, and then we have to remove this piece right here in order to access a hole, that same hole, inside the frame. When you're manipulating the rock slider on the jack stands, make sure you hold onto the rock slider and the jack stand and kind of move both together. That way you don't drop it or crush yourself. Perfect. Again, we're working on the 2 front holes of the rock slider, and that is going to involve us removing a plate. So the frame from here to forward is actually boxed in. From here back, it is not. There's a cap right here to stop water and crap from going inside of the frame where it's boxed in. So we have to remove this cap in order to get this steel plate with a nut onto the back side of that hole we just unplugged. We're using a 12mm socket to remove this bolt right here. Now that we have gone through and checked that all of our holes that are there line up, step 3 is going to be installing this backer plate. And this again is a steel plate with a welded on nut, and this is on a wire. And the reason for this wire is to fish this nut through the frame to the back of the hole with that cover plate. And you're probably wondering, why such a long wire? Well, the reason is because once you uncover the plate, everything in front of that, where that front rocker panel mounting bracket is, the frame is boxed in there. There's no opening to the back of it. So you have to fish this through the frame right around this entire length in order to get that bolt through the mounting plate and into this nut here. A pro tip to install the 2 plates that are on the steel wires: you can see that when they welded up these plates, they welded the wire so it's easier to hang one way than the other. I was trying to put this exact one through the passenger side, and I kept having to try to flip it up like this and hold it, and I realized that why don't I just use this one? And this one will lay naturally onto the outside and the passenger side. You have to feed it from the back to the front. This will actually make the nut hang the right way instead of having to fight it and flip it upside down against which way gravity wants it to go. Also, easiest way that I've found to get that nut through the mounting plate and into the hole that you're holding with the wire is gonna be a left hand, right hand, and a single knee while laying on your back to try to get that all done. Unless you have a helper that can help you kind of align that hole. What I did was I used my left hand to hold the wire and align the nut, my right hand to put the bolt through, and I used my knee to change the elevation of the slider to make aligning that hole just a little bit easier. So this is gonna be a lot trickier to video than it will be in practical application. All you're going to do is you're going to feed the end, obviously with the nut on it, through the frame so you can see it through the hole of the mounting bracket that you're gonna be putting in there. Now obviously filming it's gonna be a little difficult. I'll do my best, but it's gonna be a challenge. It may not come out great. So take your nut on the wire, and I have it so that obviously the flat back is facing towards the frame and the nut portion is facing out towards the engine, and push it against the frame and just start sliding it through. The next step is going to be putting the grade 8 bolt through the very first nut on a plate that we put into the frame on the cross member. All right, so we've gotten the two front mounting holes completely installed, and they're still loose. That way we can move the slider front and rear to take up any kind of slack that needs to be taken up and align the holes for the center and the rear mounts. Now we're gonna move on to installing the center and the rear bolts into factory holes that are pre-existing in the frame. And these are a side mount. The two bottom holes on the middle and the rear have to be drilled. And for these next two holes, the center hole and the rear hole on the rocker panel on the passenger side, we're gonna be using these 2-inch grade 8 bolts along with the 2x2-inch backer plates. We are working on the center mount, and on the front facing hole, we're going to take the grade 8 bolt, it's 2 inches long, with just a flat washer and insert it into the hole. Now moving to the back side of the frame, take your 2-inch steel plate, which is in essence just a big supportive washer, and we're going to insert that over the end of the bolt. Now we're going to insert our flat washer, our lock washer, and then the nut. And now we're going to put it on finger tight. And now we're going to do the exact same process to the rear hole. Now we know all of our factory holes line up perfectly. We still have 2 more holes to drill. So now we're gonna be using our C-clamps to take up that distance between the bottom of the rock slider mount and the frame itself. All we're gonna do is place the C-clamp between the two and screw it up, and it will take up that slack, and then we can mark the holes to drill them out. So all we're gonna do is put the clamp onto the bottom of the frame and the bottom of the rock slider mount and start taking up that slack to push these together. I've got the first clamp onto the center mount. However, I really just don't know 100% if everything is going to line up perfectly. So I'm actually gonna snug down the 2 front bolts after I put the rear clamp on, just to make sure that everything is exactly where it needs to be. I don't want to drill holes and then have things move after the fact and then have to ream them out and might have a sloppy fit. All the bolts are nice and tight, and all of the C-clamps have compressed all of the gap between the bottom of the mounting plates to the frame. Everything's fitting really, really nicely right now, and it's time to mark the holes. Now before you mark your holes, take a step back and look at the rock slider and make sure it is where you want it to be. There is some movement front and back that you can do. I have mine kind of set so it follows the body seam at the front. It's got a little angle to it, so that way the slider mimics that same angle. To mark the holes underneath the mounting plates, I'm going to take a 1/2 inch drill bit and I'm going to stick it up in the hole, and it almost encompasses the entire hole, and I'm just going to find the center of it and then I'm going to spin so that the sharp point of the tip actually marks the frame itself. I'm going to center punch the holes before I drill, and then I'm going to use a 1/8 inch drill bit for a pilot hole. I almost forgot safety first. And I'm hitting the drill bit ever so often with some WD-40 to cool it down. Well, I switched from my crappy Harbor Freight Warrior brand drill bits to my trusty DEWALT drill bits, and the results were obvious. I probably would have been there until I was 50 years old trying to drill through that with this, but the DEWALT went right through it. The pilot hold is done, and now we're gonna bump up to a 1/4 inch drill bit and make another hole. All right, time for the 1/2 inch. I've got that hole done and it looks great. I'm gonna throw a bolt in it, that way it doesn't move, and I'm gonna move back and drill out the rear hole. And the bolt we're gonna use for this one is the 1.5 inch long grade 8 bolt. Bolt and flat washer through the hole, then flat washer, lock washer, and nut. All right, now we gotta drill out this back hole. Final hole drilled, let's put a bolt in it. And this again uses the shorter 1.5 inch grade 8 bolt, and it's bolt flat washer from the bottom through the hole, flat washer, lock washer, and then nut. This thing looks so good, I'm ecstatic. But now we're gonna go through and take a 3/4 inch wrench and socket and tighten up all the bolts. And now we're gonna tighten down the center bolts. Now these are grade 8 bolts between steel. I'm just really not torquing them to any spec. I'm just giving it all I've got. They are super tight, they're not coming loose, and I'm very confident of that. Now let's get these 2 front bolts locked down. And all we have left under the vehicle is reinstalling the cover plate to where the frame gets boxed in with a 12mm wrench. So now it's time to ditch these jack stands and check out our work. The final step is to install the cover plate. Now this thing is super cool. The install only takes a 4.5mm Allen or hex key and a 11mm socket with an extension just to kind of get up under the bars. And all we're gonna do is lay the plate on top and put the screws in. And it takes these button head Allen screws and a lock washer, a nylock nut, and a flat washer. First things first, let's get this plate sitting on top of the sliders. And all the holes line up perfectly, just like I knew it would. First things first, in goes the bolt. On the back side goes the flat washer first, and then the nylock nut, and then tighten it down. Now I've just got to do that 7 more times. The passenger side is done and it looks absolutely phenomenal. Now it's time to move on to the driver's side, which might have a little bit of complication because of a wiring harness that's kind of in the way, but let's see what happens. So I know what you're thinking. Wardrobe change, right? No, not exactly. It's actually 5 days in the future. I got called away for work, but now I'm back and we're doing the driver's side. The driver's side is almost identical to the passenger side that we just finished a few days ago. However, there are a little bit of nuance differences. The brake lines and an electrical module go right on the inside of the frame rail on the driver's side. So we have to do a little bit of negotiating with that. Other than that, it's the exact same install as a passenger side. So step 1 is going to be removing the cap to the pass-through hole right in front of the cross member for the transmission. Step 2 is going to be placing your plate with the welded on nut into the rectangular hole on the side of the cross member, and all you're going to do is place it in the hole and orient the nut up. Next, I'm going to bring over and set up the jack stands so they're right under the rockers, and then bring over the slider and I'm going to set it up and orient it the way it's supposed to go in preparation to get it up on the jack stands. I placed the sliders on the jack stands and I placed it low on the frame so I can see exactly where these holes are gonna line up at. And it's pretty obvious, reading directions, they refer to having to move the control module someplace else for the install process, and I couldn't quite visualize what they meant by that. Once you put the slider up underneath it and you can see where the holes actually line up at, you can see how the module's in the way and where it needs to move. And this is from inside the frame rail, what this metal mount looks like on the driver's side. This is the hole that you're having to use, and this is the actual control module, and the hole sits behind this. So we're gonna have to pull, there's 2 bolts that hold this on. We're gonna have to pull this module off and kind of offset it someplace, hook this all in, and then we'll put the module back on over it. I'm removing the 2 nuts that hold on that control module with a 12mm wrench. Here's the control module from the backside. You can tell that the screws are out, and we're just going to pull it straight out and just kind of let it hang here. And I'll probably actually, these are very important, I'll probably actually get a zip tie and zip tie this up so that it's out of the way. I'm gonna go ahead and apologize now for my excessive sweating. It is a beautiful spring day here in Phoenix, which means it's 104 degrees. So, gotta love the desert. I've gotten the module zip tied up and out of the way. Now I'm gonna get the slider up into its final position so I can get some holes mounted up. I've got a position where I want it and all the holes line up. I'm gonna start at the front bracket and put the one that goes into the cross member in first. Now I'm going to mount the middle bracket of the slider through the frame. And this is going to be the top mount, not the bottom mount. And now we're gonna get very specific. There is one specific bolt that you have to use for this install. The directions call it a ground bolt. And what they mean by that is the head has been ground down. As you can see, there's a flat spot to it right here. And this is because of the brake lines. The brake lines are gonna dictate where this goes, and that's why. And also, this is the plate we're gonna use. You can tell it's the chopped off short one. These are what all the other plates look like. This is the short chopped off one we're using for the middle bracket through the frame on the driver's side. This right here is the hole we're gonna use to mount the middle bracket through the frame. We're using our ground down bolt and bracket, and all we're going to do is we're gonna put it in and we're just going to push the brake line up just a little bit and then push that bolt through. Let the brake line just kind of rest on it. And here you can see the head of the bolt protruding through. And now to finish it off, we're gonna do flat washer, lock washer, and nut, and we're gonna cinch it down. Now we're gonna install the nut on the big long wire. And first we have to remove that plate that covers up where the frame gets boxed in, right behind the cross member. So this right here is something to do with the brake lines. I don't quite know exactly what it does. And the bolt we have to work on is right behind that, of course. We're going to use our 12mm wrench and remove this bolt here to be able to remove this bracket right here to get inside of the frame. So now that we've got that out of the way, we're going to be working with our welded on nut to our plate on a wire, and we're going to insert it into the frame and all the way down to where the hole is at the cross member. And we're just going to leave that right there. This is our very last bolt with no nut on it, and it's going to go into the side of the frame at the very front mount. Index it to the hole. Gonna grab the wire of our nut, and we're gonna fish it through. So I'm just kind of indexing it with my finger, and now that I know it's pretty much right there, start screwing it on. You can tell we're getting close. We've only got 3 bolts left. We're gonna be working with the longer bolt, and this bolt is going through the frame because we obviously haven't drilled out the 2 holes at the bottom. So again, we're gonna take our bolt and flat washer, put it into the hole on the slider side, and then we're gonna move around to the back side. This is gonna be a little confined because of the gas tank and the fuel lines that are right all here, but you can see the bolt sticking out kind of back here. It's hard to see, but you'll know what I'm talking about. First things first, it's going to be the backer plate, and it's pretty confined in here, but using your hands you can kind of feel around and feel where it needs to go. Once you get that on, flat washer, split washer, and now the nut, and then tighten it down. Only finger tight, and it's a lot easier to tighten from the bolt side than the nut side because of the confinement. So our next step is going to be to get the slider snugged up against the frame so we can mark our holes. To do that, we're going to start with the very front mounting bolt that goes into the cross member, and we're going to tighten this down with a 3/4 inch socket. And now working at the middle mount, we're going to take our C-clamp and clamp this down, get it nice and tight up against the frame. That one clamp cinched up the middle and the rear nice and tight up against the frame. So now we're gonna mark the holes. I've got the holes marked. I'm gonna center punch them. Then I'm gonna drill out my pilot hole with a 1/8 drill bit, and then move to a 1/4 drill bit, and then finish it off with a 1/2 inch drill bit. Don't forget high quality drill bits. They will save you time and energy. 100% worthwhile. Mine are DEWALT. But whatever high quality drill bits you have will work. Don't go the cheap stuff. You will spend hours trying to drill these holes out. Take my word for it. But first, because I'm a fast learner, safety gear. Because I don't want to burn my hands again. That was pretty painful the first time. And remember, when you're drilling these holes on the driver's side, the brake line is up against the frame rail right in front of it. So you shouldn't be near it because you're drilling towards the outer edge of the frame rail on the bottom here. However, be very cautious when you're drilling through not to over penetrate and get that drill bit sideways where you have a chance to nick that brake line. So this hole is complete. Insert the bolt with flat washer, split lock washer, and then the nut. And then tighten it down with a 3/4 socket and a 3/4 wrench. All right, let's get this last hole drilled. I have finally gotten the last hole drilled. Thank God. I don't know if my drill bit was getting dull, but that seemed to take significantly longer than the other 3 holes. Let's get the hardware in this hole and finish this project up. All the hardware is in and it's tight. Now I'm going to go through and make sure that all 6 bolts on the driver's side are as tight as I can get them. I have one go back that I completely spaced in the process. This spacer actually goes underneath the bolt that goes into the cross member of the transmission on the very front mount on both sides. I spaced it, so I'm gonna fix that now. So we fixed that issue, got all 6 bolts tightened down as hard as I can get them, and now all we have to do is replace the cap that covers up where the frame is boxed in and put the module back on, and the driver's side will be done except for the really awesome cover plate. We're gonna start with the module. I'm gonna remove the zip tie. These are the 2 nuts that came off of it, and all we're gonna do is replace them back on. You can see the 2 bolts that retain the module, they're offset. This one's higher, this one's lower. So it obviously goes right back in just like this, the way we removed it. Insert the bolts through, take the nuts on the back side, just thread them on. That's nice and sturdy for now. We'll tighten that down here in a second. While we're under here, we're going to replace the cap to right here with this little cover. Push that back up in there. Take the bolt we used to retain it. And now we have 1,000 little wrenches to get it back on using a 12mm wrench. Thank God that's done. And now we're going to tighten down the 2 nuts to the control module. The slider is installed and this thing is rock steady. This isn't going anywhere. Now it's time to install the cover plate and we'll be completely finished. The White Knuckle off-road rock slider install is complete and it looks amazing. But again, it got dark on me. We're gonna have to wait till tomorrow to check it out. This is my first trip with my White Knuckle off-road rock sliders and they are completely flawless. I love the way they look, I love the way they perform. They don't budge, they don't make contact with the rockers. They do their job and they do it very well. I highly suggest White Knuckle. If you're in the market for sliders, hit them up. You will not regret it. I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, please do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button and be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time.